Thank you, Minister, for this very inspiring intervention. I'd like to welcome Mr. Jayanta Jayasuriya, Attorney General of Sri Lanka, His Excellency. Please.
Thank you. Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Sri Lanka is a common law country with an adversarial system of justice. Principles relating to the administration of justice mechanism are recognized and provided for a number of written laws as well as through judicial pronouncements and determinations. The basic foundation and framework relating to the administration of criminal justice is contained in the legal principles found in three main pieces of legislation, namely the Penal Code, Code of Criminal Procedure Act, and the Evidence Ordinance. Of course, these three pieces of legislation were introduced during the period of British colonial rule, and they continue to be in operation for more than a century. However, certain changes that had taken place in between have brought in necessary changes and amendments to these laws which were introduced a century ago. The main focus of the mechanism and framework provided under these laws was the creation of offenses, detection, investigation, prosecution, and punishment of offenders. To achieve these objectives, separate agencies with different powers and functions were established, and the investigative agencies such as police, with the law enforcement powers, Office of the Attorney General with prosecutorial powers, and magistrate and high court judges with judicial powers were established to determine on the guilt or innocence of the accused. In the traditional penal law, the concept of stolen property is found in the Penal Code, which provides the substantive criminal law. Property derived from offenses such as theft, extortion, robbery, criminal misappropriation, and criminal breach of trust is considered stolen property, and they cease to be such property when they return into the hands of person from whom they were removed. These were the legal principles that were established a century ago. However, the need to further enhance and strengthen this legal regime has been well recognized and acknowledged in the recent past. The insufficiency of the current legislation relating to stolen property to deter offenders and address the needs of the society was further highlighted with the globally accepted doctrine that criminals should be deprived with the opportunity to enjoy fruits of their wrongdoings. This had brought in new dimensions to the administration of justice mechanisms. These new dimensions brought in the new changes to the existing legal mechanisms are need to be addressed. Laws relating to bribery and corruption, anti-money laundering, and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters have been introduced into our legal system with a view to meet these challenges. Multiple agencies that were in existence as well as created under these legal regimes, as well as agencies created through administrative mechanisms, play a major role in the current legal system in Sri Lanka. The Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption, which is commonly known as CIABOC, focuses on investigating and prosecuting instances of bribery and corruption, including on illicit enrichment of proceeds. Several specialized agencies of the Sri Lanka Police, including the Criminal Investigation Department, and the Financial Crimes Investigation Division, as well as the Financial Intelligence Unit, or commonly known as FIU, of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, focus on criminal law enforcement and investigations into different categories of offences relating to fraud and corruption, as well as handling of proceeds of crime, taking the manifestation of money laundering. The offence of money laundering arising from predicate offences and the mechanisms created under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and Financial Transactions Reporting Act of 2006 has brought in new dimensions and mechanisms for further strengthening the fight against fraud and corruption and the battle against the recovery of stolen assets and proceeds of crime. With the election of the incumbent government in 2015, the need to further strengthening and enhance existing mechanisms was well recognized to ensure its policy of zero tolerance on corruption and fraud in public sector. The importance of international cooperation cannot be underestimated if we are to succeed in this endeavor. We have to think globally and act locally and internationally. While the law on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters provides a strong foundation in the domestic legal system, an effective and efficient assistance provided in a timely manner by foreign jurisdictions will no doubt provide us with invaluable strength to achieve our goal. The Presidential Task Force on Recovery of Stolen Assets, established in 2015, performs a major role in taking necessary initiatives among different stakeholder law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies and focusing on bridging existing gaps in the legislative framework. Absence of a specific legislation on proceeds of crime with powers of civil forfeiture has been recognized as a significant gap that needs to be remedied sooner than later. A working group has been established by the start to develop the policy and legal framework relating to the proposed Proceeds of Crime Act of Sri Lanka. Such a legal instrument will further strengthen the existing mechanisms on tracing, freezing, and forfeiture of proceeds and instrumentalities of crime. Initiatives such as GFAR, the Global Forum on Asset Recovery, provide more strength to individual jurisdictions. Collective action by world community will guide the individual jurisdictions the path to success. The commitment and the interest shown by the international community to support and strengthen Sri Lanka's efforts is well demonstrated by the invitation extended to Sri Lanka to participate in this event as a focus country, the invitation which was readily accepted. Sharing of experience and lessons learned and an exposure to best international practices through frank discussions among counterparts will be a great opportunity. More focused, case-specific bilateral discussions will not only be an opportunity to further strengthen existing relations, but also would lead to a more closer understanding on the domestic systems of each other. On behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, I wish to thank the organizers of this great event and acknowledge the keen interest, commitment, and the support extended by the co-hosts, their supporters, and partners, namely the United Kingdom, United States of America, the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, the World Bank, and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your commitment. I would like to introduce His Excellency Khurshid, Minister of State Domains and Land Affairs of Tunisia. Please, sir.
السيد المستشار نائب رئيس البنك العالمي، السادة الوزراء.
Ministers, Your Excellency Ministers, Your Excellencies Ambassadors, Attorneys General and prosecutors, I prefer to speak to you standing because in my background I was a lawyer, and in the beginning it's imperative for me to congratulate the World Bank, Switzerland, Nigeria for signing on this memorandum of agreement. I hope that Tunis will be the second in this effort. It is my pleasure to be among you, representing my country, Tunis, at the head of a delegation that includes the main officials that work on repatriating financial stolen funds. We hope that this forum will be beneficial and fruitful. At the beginning, please allow me on my behalf of myself and my delegation and my government, I present my thanks for all those who worked on arranging this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, stealing the wealth of the peoples unfairly has always been a cause for leading instability that led to revolutions and extremism, because corruption is accompanied with terrorism. My country has lived through a lot through public theft of public funds from inside and outside. Each time it proceeded towards its plans and hopefully to succeed in this historical. How not when Tunisia had produced Abul Qasim al-Shadi, the poet, the famous poet, who said, when people one day want to live, then destiny should respond. We were able in 2011 to start a new phase. Among the main characteristics were democracy and good governance and grow development of deprived areas and stopping corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, our ministry guards public resources and try to recover it from those who stole it inside and outside, and the legislation in Tunisia had the National Commission for Forfeitures, and they charged them with confiscating the wealth from the previous president to repatriate millions of dollars to the treasury in Tunis. This commission is working to expedite this mission by law with all the guarantees that they're in. We look forward to this confiscation as an alternate method to protect the people from the unlawful or illicit theft of monies. We believe that this conference or this forum will crystallize the ideas about that, will protect the individuals and also assist in protecting the national groups as a whole. My country had also established a new commission to repatriate smuggled monies. It succeeded in creating a database for that and defined, in many cases, the places where these stolen funds are hidden. So this comes under the work of our ministry, the focus of which is to repatriate all these stolen money. Tunisia also promulgated a new constitution that protects individuals and protects the public good. This was our experience in democracy, democratic rule. The government of national unity these days is the result of this national effort to work in that arose in a region that is full of instability and extremism. So the judges are to guarantee their neutrality, are now working separately, independently. Tunis had extended its hand since 2008, signed on the United Nations to fight corruption, and worked on implementing Article 304 also to protect the whistleblowers, to protect them and their families from the ill deeds of the corrupt people. So they provided also the good information to provide the good governance. The government of national unity that I represent announced that war on local domestic corruption and to fight organized crime, which aims at stealing the wealth of the country. We succeeded in bringing those actors to justice. This was the first thing. This first campaign had a very positive reception by the public in Tunisia, and also had a positive effect locally and outside the country, even here in the United States. In Tunisia, the government of national unity also returned all these monies that were stolen internally and waged a campaign to return and expropriate all these lands, the vast lands that were taken, to apportion them to small farmers and to benefit the national groups. Also to the buildings that were owned by the defunct party that was ruling at that time. And it is returned to the properties of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, on the external field, Tunis had extended its hand to return its money that was stolen from it, and the legal and administrative authorities had all worked diligently on that. The STAR and the United Nations or the World Bank had helped us, but the results were very weak, rather disappointing, and disappointing to an optimistic people. Tunis had spent several years of their efforts to return. They only managed to get 2 yachts and 2 planes and a small amount of money, not to exceed $250,000. That was done through the help of Switzerland, for which we thank her. We also, in a joint effort with Tunisian, we could regain $3 million from one of the relatives of the former president. And from Lebanon, we were able to return 28 million Tunisian dinars that were expropriated from the former president's wife. That's all was the result of all these repatriated funds in my country. My people that needs all of these funds for continued and sustainable development in the deprived and vulnerable regions, so that we can invest this return money and disperse them on development. But this effort had been limited, unfortunately, up to this day. The hopes that the Tunisian delegation carries with them in returning the stolen money because of a very evil clique that stole its funds, thinking that when they hide them in a place that they cannot be returned and they will not be able to be subject to law. So hopefully they will be disappointed. Ladies and gentlemen, in my name and in the name of the Tunisian people, I ask you to help us in returning what was stolen of our funds. Tunis had submitted several judicial requests to return these stolen monies, but it was always responded to by procedural things such as there was no final jurisdiction, and so those who committed the crimes they flee from justice. this is really something harmful, but those who could fled are present in the countries where they hid their monies also. Some of the sovereign decisions that the government is really a good basis for returning the stolen money to the people. The provision of Article 57 of the International Agreement for Fighting Corruption opens new horizons to take courageous measures that are expected by taking bilateral actions concerning repatriation of stolen money. In conclusion, please allow me to tell you that our feeling of the weak cooperation and limited results is the justification for our presence here under the roof of the World Bank group here, but it will not in any case stop our efforts and will not stop these efforts from the European Union and Switzerland and their significance in protecting the Tunisian people when they retained the funds and the monies that are suspicious, and which we hope that they will continue to chase to apprehend those perpetrators. We hope that they will assist Tunisia to protect their funds until we conclude a similar agreement like today's to return the monies. May God help us reach a conclusion that will benefit us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to now introduce His Excellency Valery Chary, Ukraine Ambassador to the United States of America. Please.
Thank you. Dear Ms. Pasar-Bazioglu, dear Baroness Williams of Trafford, Your Excellencies, dear ambassadors, dear representatives of non-government organizations, journalists from the focus country, from our partners, United States, United Kingdom, and I see many, many countries that's very helpful for this important activity in the world. I have a privilege to speak on this gathering that is highly important for transparency and democracy of many world nations, including Ukraine. I would like to thank the host, United Kingdom, United States, the World Bank, especially that you provide Ukrainian translation. Thank you so much, because many times and many years it was Russian translation. Now it's a real privilege that you recognize finally everything is our sovereignty independence. And definitely Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative for organizing this meeting. I also want to mention that we have here, and I'm glad that today among participants a very big Ukrainian delegation sitting in the second row, all the row by the way, and this our representatives of our General Prosecutor's Office, but also our new agencies created 3.5 years ago after the Revolution of Dignity, after the social movement and protests. Among us, head of National Anti-Corruption Bureau Artem Sitnik, head of Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor Nazar Kholodnitsky, head of ARMA Anton Yanchuk, and head of State Financial Monitoring Service Vitaly Hiluk. And I'm really proud that they are to choose ambassador, just represent all our agencies. On behalf of my country, I will speak about success of Ukraine. But before I will speak about that, let me just to make my personal take on this particular issue. When I was a student in 1991, when Ukraine became an independent country, it was finally independent from Soviet Union, from Russia, by the way, I couldn't imagine, it's very hard to imagine that I will be among the participants of GFAR. Discuss such topic. Because in that time it seemed absolutely impossible. We built new democratic country, but unfortunately we faced the problems. Really problems of transformative period of a country, and unfortunately not all politicians just to find the solutions for themselves. In 2010, when I told Then President of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, personally told, because I'm leave position of Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, I told him, you are chose the wrong way. What he did? He said, it's a joke, you're wrong. So everything will be good. It's absolutely that he told to me. I told him no. It will lead you to catastrophe, your personal catastrophe and the catastrophe of my country. And finally, now the former president of Ukraine in Russia, and he is, under investigation, do not have any trust from Ukrainian people, and this is, believe me, it's a very bad final of his life and for his family. And that's a very good story. But finally, 4 years ago, before the Revolution of Dignity, before the social movement, when I was with my friends very active, we also can imagine that we have such a success story with just discuss the possible ways of cooperation and very important thing how to recover these assets. So that's why very important time for my country, very important day. And I'm proud to speak before you, but I also want to congratulate Nigeria for such a historical event today, and I wish Sri Lanka and definitely Tunisia also to, in the future, sign such an agreement. Ukraine, remains committed to advancing a path of comprehensive reforms, and also reforms in this particular sphere. We're doing well now, much better that we can imagine, but not enough with perception and ratings of Ukrainian people. I believe that recovery of illegally obtained assets is a perception in Ukraine like a cornerstone for combating corruption, money laundering, organized crime, systematically as a whole. This is the task of the national security and economic growth of Ukraine. It is also a main avenue for Ukraine's reforms, an important issue on the international agenda of Ukraine and US-Ukraine cooperation. Process of asset monitoring and recovery has been designed as a coordinated effort with participation of various agencies, as I told you. In particular, Prosecutor General Office of Ukraine play an important role and a stakeholder in this process. Just give you some figures. 32 criminal proceedings on corruption cases are under investigation. Among them, 15 former Ukrainian high-ranking officials, including the former president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, who was the subject of EU sanctions, were notified on suspicion. According to experts' estimates, in the days of Viktor Yanukovych's regime, his criminal organization caused damage to Ukraine in the amount of more than $40 billion. This equals to 1 year spending of our state budget. Can you imagine? And I'm glad that today we can talk about substantial results of Ukraine in asset recovery. Some examples of our success story and what we are doing now. This March, Ukrainian court, within the framework of the criminal proceedings of the Prosecutor General's office, sentenced for confiscation of $1.4 billion United States dollars in assets, as well as for the special confiscations of funds in the amount of 50 million from bank accounts in Latvia. This September, the Ukrainian court confiscated another set of assets for the amount of about $200 million to the Ukrainian budget within the framework of the criminal proceedings conducted by the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine regarding the criminal organization of Viktor Yanukovych. Following the results of the cooperation of the Prosecutor General Office with the U.S. Department of Justice, I thank for that, U.S. Department of Justice, we now have very intensive work, and one of these results is money illegally embezzled by the former leadership of the Minister of Justice of Ukraine were recovered in June this year, just now. As an ambassador, I welcome the success of our joint cooperation and looking forward to more to come. Ukraine is actively involved in the international cooperation. Since March 2014, the Prosecutor General Office sent 228 requests for legal assistance and proceeding against former high-ranking officials to 40 countries across the world. Over the past few years, the volume of cooperation between Ukraine and foreign jurisdictions in criminal cases can increase almost threefold. But the period of our request execution is still lengthy. That's a problem, which is sometimes even more than 1 year. Unfortunately, we do not have such a time, and very criticized. I know my colleagues and head of agencies very criticized by the people with very slow steps, no results. So please go further. And in that case, it's my just personal take, sometimes violation of existing rules and existing laws is also unacceptable. So we need to go further as fast as possible, but without any violation. It's a case of my country because we see sometimes there's some competition between the different agencies. It's very difficult sometimes to find the coordination. So it's not an easy way, and we understand this through our own experience. But we successfully find a solution, and the demonstration of coordination on the very different agencies, new agencies, is a significant example how you can achieve result. Within the framework of EU and Switzerland administrative sanctions and PGO's criminal proceedings against Yanukovych and his entourage, more than 120 million of Swiss francs, more than 180 million US dollars and 8 million euros, as well as 620 kilos of gold were seized outside Ukraine. We are glad to have a positive experience of cooperation with law enforcement officers from many partner countries. Despite the complexity and length of the request execution procedure in Switzerland, several Ukrainian requests for the seizure of funds have already been executed in the mentioned country. Thank you for that. I have a list of this example here, but we know everybody what we are talking about. However, following the productive investigation and operation, it is the court that makes a final call on the confiscation of criminal assets. The ongoing justice reform in Ukraine remains to be a bottleneck for the court's capacity to efficiently and diligently process numerous cases, sometimes several thousand in one district court. Can you imagine? It's absolutely blocked any activity and results. And an anti-corruption court is a pressing need for Ukraine. We expect that the new draft law on anti-corruption court is expected to be submitted to the parliament by the end of this year. I believe in that. And we believe that in this creation of this anti-corruption court, we create the system of anti-corruption institution, absolutely new system. But what not less important, just understand the experience of each country. I mean the specifics of each country and historical specific perception by the people. So my experience, I remember was when I was a member of a team who created in Ukraine in 1997 one of the anti-corruption institution, National Bureau of Investigation. And it was a very success story for 2 years. But finally, unfortunately, it was a fault, and we didn't create this agency, despite of very motivated, very active people. Why? Because resistance of growth a new institution, resistance against new people grows dramatically if you achieve result. That's why very important to have a full support by the people, full support and political leadership. And I am proud that my president and my government now are really against corruption. They are ready to fight corruption. They are ready to use a political will, despite of many problems, because many of our ministers are former businessmen or even president, but they understand no other way to develop the country. We understand together, who is sitting in the Ukrainian delegation, no other way that's awaiting from us Ukrainian people. And with your support, with support of our partners, I am sure that we will find the way, right way, and finally, and in the finish of this way, we will have prosperity, and we will help not only country that's less corruption, but we will have new society, we will have new leadership, we will have new people that lead the country. So thank you so much that you're doing such a great job. And support Ukraine. It's a very difficult time for us when we are not a political meeting, but let me just remind you that we are under aggression of our neighboring country, Russia. So that's a war. Despite of war, we achieved the great results with your support. Thank you so much. I wish you good discussion here. And welcome to Ukraine. Just see the result of our fight for dignity and our prosperity. Thank you for your attention.
شكرا حضرة السفير تشارلي بالعمل اللي تم في أوكرانيا في 2008. إذا ما سمعته كان بثبات نغمة جيدة الآن وصلنا إلى الشق الأخير من هذه الجلسة وسمعنا من ممثلي الدول الأربعة عن التحديات التي تواجههم في العثور على الأموال العامة التي تم تخبئتها في مناطق أجنبية. لا أدري لقد تأثرت من سماعي عن الجهود والشجاعة التي قدمها السادة الأربعة هنا. ساندي ونائب رئيس البنك الدولي والمشاور العامة قالت بفصاحة يلزم بشخصين للرقصة التانجو، وهناك شخصان أيضا الذين يسرقون الأموال يحتاجوا إلى وسيط مالي يساعد على قبول الأموال ويغسلها. وضمن
has been especially proactive in advancing the global anti-corruption agenda and has had notable successes in tracing and returning stolen public assets to the countries from which they were taken. The Memorandum of Understanding signed earlier today is an important example of Switzerland's leadership in this area. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Roberto Balzaretti, Secretary of State and Head of the Director of International Law, Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. Please.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis désolé, Monsieur le Ministre, de vous tourner.
I'm sorry, Mr. Minister. I'm turning my back to you. Mr. Minister, eminent delegations, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure and honor to be here today. I want to thank, as the other speakers did, the UK, the United States, and STAR, to have organized this first global forum on assets recovery. I also want to thank the 4 countries involved: Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Tunisia, and Ukraine. We've heard of their engagement, their efforts, their strength, the energy they're putting into rebuilding their countries and recovering assets that were stolen from their country illegally. I think that the importance of events like the GFAR is double. First of all, we can talk about specific experiences, so we can have exchanges on specific cases for 3 days, but it's also an occasion to talk more broadly on the policies we're implementing with experts from the financial world, from the legal world, and with diplomats like me. Obviously, the goal is to continue our common efforts, to continue with our strong political determination, which must lead us to a special impetus and lead to tangible results. In other words, funds that are returned and used in an intelligent way for the people. We participated in the Arab Forum and also in the Ukrainian Forum on the assets recovery. And obviously, these are the forums which were a source of inspiration for these political ideas and which led to concrete activities in several cases. Today, we are talking of all of this on a global level, and we're talking with countries which have become our focal points because they're especially important for us. As you know, in Switzerland, there are frozen assets of Tunisia, Ukraine, Egypt also. These assets have been frozen because the leaders of those previous governments have come under certain measures, but also because the people surrounding them also led to certain measures. Our government, once again, is going to reevaluate these measures at the end of the year and decide if they should be ongoing or they should be modified. The idea of the GFAR, just like the previous forums, was to continue to work with those countries who are trying to recover these assets which were stolen from their countries through dialogue, trust, and a spirit of partnership. And this partnership spirit is really the key element if we really want to make a difference. And this is good for Switzerland, and it is good for the country which wants to recover its assets, but it's also good for other countries. I don't want to be too lengthy, but the story starts in 1986 with the assets of the former president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos. Some of you might remember that after his fall from power, there was a popular movement in the world, and at that time our government made decisions that it never took before, based on the Swiss constitution, saying that the government can take measures to preserve, to free certain assets. And so without any laws, without any specific measures, the government decided to freeze the assets of Marcos in Switzerland. Since then, we have continued to improve our legal basis, our legislation. We've continued to improve procedures, first of all, for prevention. We've had various laws to fight money laundering, and our standards have become international standards. In other words, international financial intermediaries have to know their accounts, have their clients, and then there were measures requiring special diligence when these people were known to the public, and then when these measures were not sufficient, when people were able to get through this net of measures, even though some of the measures were rigorous, we took even more rigorous measures to identify the assets, freeze them, and send them back. Last year, in 2016, we passed another law which provides for very sophisticated mechanism to freeze and seize and forfeit and then return assets which were illegally obtained. We want to prove through these legal measures and through our international action. First of all, there's the Lausanne process, which regrouped practitioners and led to a catalog of directive when it comes to international legal cooperation. And the second point I want to mention is something we organized with the Ethiopian Open Government to set up best practices for the recovery of assets. And then so these two measures and the modification are legal basis is what we did to show the world that we no longer wanted these assets to be held in our country. So that's the first thing I want to mention. I must say that our financial market must be a clean market. We want to have ethical and moral principles, and we want to have integrity. And then, in addition, we are a country which is committed to helping others in other countries to develop. And it wouldn't be logical, on one hand, to try to help countries to develop, but on the other hand, to keep their assets. So I'm not going to give you a list of cases, but I will say that we're probably the country, the financial market, which has restituted the most funds in the last 2 decades, up to $2 billion. And we did learn a few lessons with these restitution procedures. In fact, we learned 2 main lessons, which are really essential lessons. First of all, a successful restitution must involve cooperation between the government which is restituting the funds and the government which is getting the funds. You need a real partnership. And the second thing we learned is that although all cases are different, each case must be dealt with differently, but there are common elements in the restitution procedure, whatever the situation might be. So these common elements can be divided in 3 main categories. First of all, you need a real partnership. The interests must be shared, but also the responsibility must be shared. Dialogue, trust, these are words we've heard today, but shared interest and the responsibility of the countries wanting assistance and the responsibility of the country giving assistance. So they have to have shared interest. And since these governments who have these assets must seize them and make sure they're forfeited, but on the other hand, the other government must make sure corruption does not go on. They must fight against impunity because this is their responsibility. As I said before, each case is special, and my second point is that you have to be creative, but at the same time, you must be pragmatic. You have to find practical solutions. Sometimes we invited some solutions, as you saw. We just signed a memorandum of understanding with Nigeria. We hadn't thought of this before, but there are other things we can think of when we say when there's a will, there's a way. And so for the restitution to succeed, this restitution must take place in a well-structured framework with an international monitoring and with special attention given to transparency and what we call in English accountability. Indeed, we must know who's going to receive the funds. The funds must go back to the victims of the theft. In other words, mainly to the population of the country. And when there are victims, it must be the victims who get the money, but they must be recognized also as victim, and that's very important. They must be compensated. So all these elements were formed the framework in which we worked. when we had our discussions and then negotiated the MOU with Nigeria, and this process succeeded. And it was very interesting because we took into consideration all these elements. And as I say, it's necessary to have a partnership, to have trust, dialogue, innovation, and the most vulnerable people in the country must benefit from this restitution of funds. I hope and I'm convinced that this MOU we just signed with Nigeria will open the way for new agreements. I think we're really pioneers here with our Nigerian colleagues and with the support of the World Bank. Perhaps we'll be able to do it again. And that would be really a double success if we're able to do that. So to come to the conclusion, the Abacha case is not the solution of the Abacha case is not an accident. The identification of these key elements for restitution was essential. And what's interesting to note is that Nigeria introduced during the last assembly of the states who are party to the Convention of the UN on corruption, a resolution that was accepted. And it's interesting to note that in the framework of this GFAR conference, there will be a meeting organized to talk about these essential elements of the agreement. We're going to continue to work so that everybody is a winner. We will continue to make efforts so that the restitution procedures can take place in the well-understood interest of both countries, and we're going to continue to think about new laws to be able to restitute assets when the laws we have now are not usable. And I must say that I'm very happy to be here in this room. I see in this room a lot of expertise, a lot of intelligence, a lot of capabilities to find innovative solutions, pragmatic solutions, and please use this extraordinary conference to continue sharing practices and ideas, to continue providing each other mutual legal assistance, to bring about more trust so we can really make a difference when it comes to assets recovery. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. So I would like to introduce Mr. John Brandolino. He has been our partner on the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative STAR for the past 10 years. And he's the director of the Division for Treaty Affairs at the UN Office for Drugs and Crime. Please, John.
Thank you, Selah. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to join you today on this special occasion representing the United Nations and its Office on Drugs and Crime, known as UNODC. UNODC and the World Bank are, as you know, partners in fighting crime, so to speak, as co-administering the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative. Just last month in Vienna, we hosted the Conference of the States Parties of the UN Convention Against Corruption, which is a gathering that happens every 2 years. This was the 7th meeting of the conference. It's the body in charge of monitoring implementation of the convention, which is 14 years old and nearly universal with its 183 parties. And some of these people in the room and many of your colleagues were at that meeting, that important event. And I've been involved with the convention since its inception. And as its implementation matures, we can say as UNODC, that while the states parties and other stakeholders in the convention have always had a notable interest in asset recovery, we are definitely seeing an increase in practical activity related to asset recovery. That was evident last month in Vienna in the various discussions on the asset recovery agenda item. We had a special Star Day event, which was very heavily attended. And in the margins of the meetings and all the discussions that were related to asset recovery, it was clear. And this week, we will get an even sharper focus on how, at least in the context of the particular 4 countries, the words, norms, and obligations of the state parties to the UN Convention are being turned into practical action. As mentioned by the previous speakers, the unique nature of this forum and its design gives us tremendous opportunity to deliver on the promise of the UN Convention Against Corruption. We have represented here this week all the ingredients of success in asset recovery. And that includes, first, political will through the high-level representation that we see here from the co-hosts, from the focus countries. Second, the technical expertise, all of you sitting here and others outside the room, through the operational and legal insight of the many law enforcement and policy people that work on the cases. Third, cross-border cooperation through the perspective and through the bilateral case-related meetings we will be having. And finally, demand from society, which we see this week through the perspective and activism of civil society and their contributions. So the momentum of GFAR has already started. Focus countries have made efforts to prepare their priority cases for productive bilateral meetings. Several countries have updated or produced new asset recovery guides, as well as beneficial ownership guides that are made available through the STAR website. STAR has finalized several new updated knowledge products, including the Asset Recovery Watch database, a directory of asset recovery networks, and new publications on bankruptcy and asset recovery. And of course, there was the MOU signing that we just witnessed. And thank you, Nigeria, Switzerland, and World Bank colleagues for your hard work to make this happen. UNODC is privileged to be a part of GFAR, and we pledge to do our part, including as the co-partner of the STAR initiative, to help maintain this momentum. I would like to join my World Bank partners in thanking the co-hosts, the focus countries, and all the delegations and civil society organizations that have taken the effort to come here this week. We are confident that a few years from now, when this initiative and the implementation of UNCAC have both further matured, we will look back with pride for having been here at the inaugural meeting of the Global Forum on Asset Recovery. We wish you all a productive and energizing week. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I know this has been a very long afternoon, but I have an important announcement to make. This year, the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, a partnership between the World Bank and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, celebrates its 10th anniversary. For the past 10 years, STAR has been supporting countries in building capacity in asset recovery and facilitating collaboration and partnerships on specific asset recovery cases. To celebrate STAR's 10th anniversary and for a chance to wind down from the first day of GFAR, we would like to invite everyone now to a reception. The reception will take place in the IFC private dining area on the K level of this building, and STAR staff will guide you in the right direction. Furthermore, an important part of this forum are the bilateral meetings. Details on these are provided in the information note, and you can approach our team for any questions. There will be a bilateral table on the ground floor next to room L108. Finally, I would like to wish everyone a very successful forum. Please make the most of this unique opportunity to make a real progress on the asset recovery cases that you are currently working on. And I really hope that we use this forum to exchange ideas, share experiences, and come up with new solutions in partnership with colleagues from all over the world. Good luck, and please keep up fighting the good fight. Thank you.